Okay. So I thought to talk a little bit this morning about the conditions that we need to have in order to gain full serenity. Okay, to go through all the stages and gain that. Because if we have all the external and internal conditions set properly, then it becomes much easier to concentrate. Whereas when we lack those external and internal conditions, then we may practice a lot, but not get a lot, not get anywhere, or not get as far as we would like. Okay, so in the scriptures they talk about six main six main conditions to have when you're doing a retreat on serenity. And by extension, although we may not be doing that kind of retreat in the near future, to set up these conditions as best as we can in our daily lives, even though we can't have them completely fulfilled, to do the best we can. Okay, so the first condition is to live in a favorable place. That is a place where it's calm and quiet and healthy. Okay, with clean water and fresh air. A place where we can get the requisites of food, clothing, shelter, and medicine easily, so that we don't have to be distracted by trying to figure out how to get what we need to stay alive. And we don't have to engage in any kind of wrong livelihood to get those requisites. It's very good if we can meditate in a place where previous meditators have meditated, because that gives us a lot of inspiration. Also, the place where we meditate should be safe, so no danger of wild animals or hunters or whatever, because again, that kind of thing would stir up our mind and prevent concentration. Although it's quite interesting, in the Theravada tradition, previously when they had forests in Thailand, now they don't have so many forests, but they would go out in the forest, and if they encountered a tiger or something like that, they would say that would be a good condition for generating samadhi, because samadhi is your only alternative to freaking out. It's the only way you're going to handle the situation. But I think for new people, that's not the optimum way to practice. Okay? Once you have some familiarity with concentration and with the practice, then it could be that if you're in a dangerous situation, that could really spur you on to, go into one of the jhanas. But when you don't have the skills yet and the training, then actually that situation is probably going to distract you. Okay? So you want to be in a place where you don't have a lot of human beings kind of wandering around, asking you questions, wanting you to get involved in things, where you don't hear a lot of machines or radios and so on. In Dharamsala, there's up on the mountain, way up above, more than several hours walk from MacLeod Ganj, there was a nest, a little community of meditators. That's where Genla Rinpa meditated up there. And it used to be very, very quiet. And then the Indian villages got radios. And even though the villages are quite far away, because of the structure of the mountains, you can hear the radio clear across. Okay. So again, if you already have some experience in concentration, that probably, would help you deepen it. But if you don't, that's going to be a distraction. Okay, so we can already see that a lot of our present living situations are not really the conducive ones. If you're living in a city and you have traffic going by, in front of your house, you have the neighbor's dog barking, you have your computer beeping, you have your children crying or wanting your attention or whatever. So automatically you can see in that kind of situation, it's going to be more difficult to generate serenity. So that doesn't mean that you don't try. Of course, in your daily meditation practice, you can do this and you can try. But also you be realistic about, if you're having difficulties, well, this is why. It's not just that you're the only person who can't concentrate on the avenue, Okay? Also, in the place you live, you should, if you're doing serenity retreat or any kind of retreat, you should be near a Dharma teacher. And you should be near Dharma friends. And you should have studied the instructions very well before you begin the retreat. Because, when you sit down to do the retreat, all sorts of things come up in your body and mind that you may not have experienced before, and you may not have thought about how to deal with these things before. So, of course, having fresh challenges can be good and spur you on. But again, sometimes if the challenges are more than we can really deal with our present level of skills, then putting ourselves in an isolated situation would not be very good. We sometimes have this American, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, I'm going to do it alone. And you combine that with thinking of Milarepa, way up on that mountain all alone. And, we have this Milarepa fantasy that we're going to go actualize serenity, at least by next Wednesday, all by ourselves, and that we're going to brave it all and know how to deal with everything that comes up in our mind. That might have a slight tinge of arrogance to it, okay? And I think it's far better to, to be practical and to see that for everything we need teachers. Yeah, for everything. I mean, to learn to walk, to learn to talk. Our parents taught us, people taught us. So we need to be near people who can help us when we engage in a serious retreat of this kind. Because especially with this, when you're working with the mind, if you haven't had a lot of experience in working with your mind can get all sorts of weird ideas. Yeah? And all sorts of, wacky things going on. So you really need to be near people where you can check those experiences out and get the help you need. And if you're having, some kind of hindrance in your practice or something's kind of blocking, then where you can get ideas of how to deal with it. So that's, again, very, very important. By the way, Milarepa, contrary to to Western mythology, he was in contact with a lot of people. How do you think he spoke all those 100,000 songs? Was he saying them to the bugs? Yeah, I mean, they were in relationship to people who came to visit him, who made offerings and brought him food, or if he had to go down to the village for one thing or another. Yeah. But what Milarepa had that we need to gain is a very firm determination to continue the practice. Okay? And a very strong bodhicitta motivation. So that kind of way, when we want to emulate Milarepa, let's look at the inner qualities he had, not just the external fantasized situation, but what internal qualities did he have that would make his retreat be successful. Okay. Now you might remember that he killed, I think it was 35 people by black magic through having samadhi. This was gaining samadhi with the wrong motivation and using it as black magic, killing all those people, and then having tremendous regret for the negativities and harm he had done. So with that mind of tremendous regret, he, sought out his teacher because he knew he needed help. And when he went into retreat, he went in with a very humble mind. Yeah, when you've killed 35 people, again, you're not going into retreat with a lot of macho, I'm going to conquer everything. At least if you're practicing correctly. You're going to go in with an incredible amount of humility and regret for the negativities and sincere wish to purify them. So very sincere motivation. Very good understanding of karma. Very strong bodhicitta. And so those kind of internal qualities are what made his retreat so successful. Okay, so those kinds of things we have to develop quite a lot of. Okay, the second condition before going into serenity retreat is going into strict retreat is we should develop a very clear and correct understanding of the methods on how to do the practice, and have done some of the practice beforehand so that we can see what comes up and see what mistakes we're making and seek advice on those very gross mistakes before we even start a strict retreat. Okay? So again, a lot of study of the methods to gain serenity. What are the hindrances? What are the obstacles? What do you meditate on to counteract them? How do you work with your body when your body isn't cooperating? Yeah, because our body doesn't always do what we want it to do, does it? Okay, how do we work with that situation? How do we work with feelings of loneliness that may come up? Or how do we work when maybe we've discovered that we're doing this retreat because we're actually pushing sentient beings away, and it's a way of building up a wall between us and others? All sorts of things come up when you do this kind of retreat, and we see sides of ourselves that we may not have seen before. So we need to have some experience under our belt, especially in the Lamrim and some meditative experience in general, so that we know how to deal with these kinds of things. Okay? That's why Lama Yeshe, when he had us do retreats for years at the beginning, he had us do group retreats. Yeah? Because there we are supported by the energy of the group. He knew us very well, and he knew that left on our own, it's amazing how often the alarm clock just doesn't ring. It just breaks every morning. Yeah, and we oversleep, And then when we, finally get to sitting down, it's almost lunchtime, so we can only do a short session. And then after lunch, our belly's too full to meditate. Okay. And then, so we read a book, then we get very involved in reading the book. Yeah, don't get to another session. So, he really wanted us to do group meditation because he knows that when you're with a group on a schedule, everybody shows up because, we all signed up for it, we all do it together, and you know that the people that you're with are going to wonder what happened to you if you're still alive, if you don't show up for a session. We had a situation here at the Abbey where somebody didn't show up for 2 sessions, and we figured out that she was lost in the woods in the dead of winter. Yeah, she had gone for a walk and didn't find her way back. Okay, so it's a good thing she wasn't doing solo retreat. Yeah. We had to call the police and the fire department and, get everybody out there looking for her. And fortunately, we found her, and she was okay. But it's not something we want to happen again because I think our local police and fire department would not be pleased with us if this happens repeatedly. Okay, so, the group structure is very good. Now, I know some people say, oh, but I don't like, I want to do my own personal schedule and meditate when I want to, and, these people in the room, they're too fidgety, and they make so much noise when they click their malas, and they zip and unzip their what is it, nylon rayon jacket, and the heat goes on and off, and the room's too cold and the room's too hot. Okay, I want to do my own retreat. But again, unless we have a lot of self-discipline, that often doesn't happen. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's why Lama really insisted on group retreats for many years at the beginning and many people continued to do them until they developed the self-discipline to really go on one's own. Okay, and then also having the knowledge of, having studied in the various scriptures about the stage, how the stages of developing serenity and all these kinds of things, so that when you sit down and you have experiences, you have some intellectual knowledge that you can suddenly go, oh, that's what they're talking about. Yeah, because you have the knowledge before, it's just intellectual, but when you start to meditate and you have some experience, then you gain some idea of what the words meant, but then also you remember about how to deal with situations, how to work with things happening. Okay, the third condition is we should be free from very coarse desires and have few desires. So they always say when they teach this one that you may live in a cave, but if we have a lot of desires while we're living in the cave, for delicious food or reputation or sex or whatever, then our retreat is not going to go so well because we're going to have so many distractions by all of these objects of desire coming up. So we want to really subdue our very gross desires. So this is why it's very important to keep precepts, because keeping precepts helps us reduce our gross desires. Okay, this is why it's important to understand the Lam Rim and the defects of cyclic existence, because when we understand those defects and we want to be free of cyclic existence, then we understand the causes of those defects, then we see that because craving and clinging are very high up on the list of the causes of samsara. And if we want to get out of samsara, then we really want to reduce our craving and clinging and develop renunciation instead. Okay? And so when you have this kind of understanding from your meditations on the stages of the path, then, you go into the retreat with fewer desires. Okay? It's amazing when you get into retreat how your mind can create a shopping list that is just, so long. And that's in addition to the shopping list you had before you started the retreat. Okay. So the mind of desire really needs to be worked with. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth one is to develop a sense of internal satisfaction and contentment. Okay? So not leaving behind the mind that wants more and better. So clearly that involves dealing with our consumer mind. If we sit down to meditate and instead we're, we're doing online shopping in our mind, or going through all those catalogs that we just received, then this is going to create a distraction, isn't it? Yeah. And so the catalogs aren't always for nice clothes or sports equipment. They could be for tools, they could be for, lawnmowers, they could be for the chippers, for the kind of seeds you want to plant in your garden next spring. The mind can have all sorts of shopping lists going on. Okay? So we need to develop contentment with our possessions. We also need to develop contentment with who we are and make peace with a lot of the ways that we relate to expectations from society. Okay? Because we've all had the conditioning from society, and we've had conditioning from our families, what our families want us to grow up and be, what kind of person, our families want. I want my son, my daughter to have such and such a career, to live in such and such a house, to give me grandchildren, to makes such and such amount of money, to come with me to all these, mother and daughter, father and son, mother and son, father and daughter gatherings, I want my children to be part of my life, and, so on and so forth. And we grew up with all of this. And all of this is naturally going to come up when we start to meditate. And especially we're focusing our mind on the Buddha, and then, you could hear the famous line, "Sheldon, come home." Do you know the story behind that? Oh. Okay, there's this joke going around in the Buddhist periodicals. There was this great, yogi who in India who had lots of students from all over the place, and it was very, very difficult to see him because he had so many students and he was so famous and everything like this. So there's this old lady back in America, and she decides that she wants to go see this famous guru, in India. And so she travels all the way to India, and it's so difficult for her because she's in her 80s, and, it's really hard, and this guru's up on this mountain, and she finally gets up on the mountain, and it's so hard and painful for her. And then, of course, the guru's attendant, guru's attendants are a whole other thing, won't let her in. The guru's too high. Who do you think you are? He's too busy with all his disciples. He can't see you. But she stayed, and she stayed for so long. Finally, she got in. She was told that she could say 3 words to the guru, and then she had to get out. And she comes in, and she says, "Sheldon, come home." Because it was her son. Okay, so, in the back of our mind, we have our parents saying, whatever your name is, come home. Be a normal kid. Yeah? Okay, so, couldn't you just imagine your mother coming up to your cave? Okay, so we need to work out these different things, where a lot of discontent and dissatisfaction can arise. This feeling in ourselves of wanting to be somebody, of wanting others to notice us, of wanting to have at least some unique qualities, to be good at something, to have people appreciate us. Yeah, because we're social creatures, and we want the reinforcement from others. And this kind of need can come up quite strong when, you're trying to do your meditation. So we have to learn how to work with it and learn to accept ourselves, learn to have confidence in the decisions we've made in our lives to practice Dharma. Yeah. Learn to feel okay with who we are without feeling that we have to prove ourselves to somebody in order to be okay. Or in order, to do something to get somebody else's approval so that we can feel good about ourselves. Okay, so that's another thing that we have to kind of work with. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have all these things completely settled in your mind. Yeah. But we have to be willing to work with these and to have some experience, for our serenity retreats to be very successful. Then the 5th condition is we should be free from involvement in worldly activities and commotion. So if we have many projects going on, it's very hard to do retreat. We know this at the Abbey because sometimes in the winter retreat there aren't enough people to kind of keep the Abbey going. So we're doing retreat but also checking the email in the office or, things like this. And so that can be distracting. So you want to have as few of those kinds of things as possible. Now, the thing is that all these busy projects are not necessarily things that are imposed on us by others. They're things that we want to get involved in. Okay? So we can't just sit and say everybody else is pushing me to do this and that. It's often coming from ourselves. I remember one person I knew, finally in India built this really, really nice retreat house, and she was going to live in retreat for a long time, and she had all these great conditions. And then she had some visa problem in India, and as it happened that other people living in the center also had visa problem, and then she became the person who was taking care of everybody else's visa problems with the Indian government. Okay? So she just kind of did this out of her own choice, out of being kind. But she very easily got snagged by projects and different things going on. So you have to really simplify your environment. Have a lot of things settled behind you, because otherwise you go into retreat and your mind is thinking, oh, how is this person? How is that person? I was supposed to complete this and I dropped it at the last minute. And, when I come out of retreat, I have to have this done by a certain deadline. And the mind gets very wrapped up in projects. So we have to, from our own side, clear things away before we start the retreat, and then also, make sure our mind stays in retreat, not getting involved with a lot of external projects or internal planning for projects. Okay. So we can already see that in our daily life, this is a big challenge, isn't it? Yeah, and so it's something that we work with constantly in our meditation practice, is how to reduce these kinds of things, how to simplify our life. Yeah, because it's us that makes our life complicated. Yeah, it's us that wants to do all these things. So we have to carve out more time in our daily life for our practice by, not watching TV so much and not looking at the blogs, and dare I say, not going on Facebook? Are you going to shoot me for that one? Kind of not knowing the latest things that are happening to all of our friends, and not really caring whether they know the latest thing happening to us either. Okay? And so really choosing what is important in our life and focusing on that. Now, of course, when we're not living in a retreat situation, we all, which is very seldom, which is very often that we're not living in a retreat situation, even if, people who are ordained or whatever, we still have to simplify our life as much as we can, okay? And get rid of the mind that kind of makes us into the busiest of the busy. Okay, and then the sixth condition is to live in pure ethical discipline. So whatever level of precepts we've had, to keep that level of precepts very well. And here's where precepts can really be something very good, because the precepts really restrain us from getting involved in distracting activities. Like one of the Bodhisattva precepts is not to act on thoughts of desire. That one is really hard to keep. But the fact that you have it and you remember it helps you begin to restrain this, all of our multifarious desires. Yeah. There's also a Bodhisattva precept not to respond to anger with anger, to insult with insult, to being beaten with beating others, and so on. So this too is very difficult, not to get angry at people who are mad at us. But just because we have the precepts, it makes us much more aware and to really try to reduce our anger. Okay, so already we can see when we have different precepts, it helps us simplify our life and work on our mind. And if we keep very good ethical conduct, then we feel good about ourselves. Our mind is very clear, so we have fewer distractions, and we aren't distracted by having guilt or having a lot of regret for doing negative actions. Okay, and so that too is, because that kind of guilt and regret can be very distracting. So that's why it's good to do purification practices. Why our teachers emphasize purification so important, and why keeping precepts is very important, because it helps us, stop doing negative actions and purify the ones we've done, and then psychologically that frees us up so much. Okay? So those are our conditions, like I said, for when we're going to do a very strict serenity retreat. If we just see in our daily life, of course we don't have all of those conditions. But what we can do is in our practice and in our life, try and create as many of those conditions as we can. And in preparation for maybe someday doing a retreat, get familiar with all of these things. So that retreat becomes a very natural extension of what we're already doing in our daily life, instead of something that's a complete break-off. Because it's very difficult to go in to retreat. You're running, and then boom, from one day to the next you go into retreat. It's going to take you some months to really, settle down. You can even see that coming here, can't you? Kind of the first day is like, oh, okay, I'm out of the city. Yeah? So it takes time. But if we simplify our life in the city as much as possible, then it aids our meditation practice on a daily basis, and then it makes it easier to slide into retreat situations when we have them. Okay? Okay, so let's do another session focusing on the Buddha. And then I really recommend in the break time between sessions that you go through these 6 conditions and really think about them, and think about how you can implement them in your life. Okay?